historically, states were known as the laboratories for democracy. Now the laboratories are in these cities where these and other mayors are solving problems and meeting the people whose problems need to be solved at the coffee shop, on the street. They're not protected by a wall of either reporters or public relations agents. They are right out there.
Our county spent $10 million to treat 2,500 people in 2016 for this addiction. They only treated 1,000 people for addiction and alcoholism. So the spread is very serious. So as mayor, you have to take action. And so we were one of the first cities in the country, in addition to declaring an emergency last June, we wanted to hold the drug companies accountable. We sued the drug companies, the manufacturers, the distributors, and actually doctors that started this mess. We were the 4th city in the country. 10 months later, over 400 communities across the country have joined. Not our suit, but moved on. So
you also wanted to tax.
Yes.
What was it? A nickel a pill.
Yes. When I was actually in the governor's race earlier, I called for a surcharge on a nickel a dose for each prescription pain reliever. Really, you shouldn't be on pain relievers very long, and that dose we could use to actually pay for the treatment and recovery. Recovery takes around 5 years for addiction. And as I was saying to some of the mayors earlier, we really when people say, what is the bottom of this for Dayton and other communities that's hit by this, I really want us to start treating addiction like the disease that it is.
Whether it's opioids or immigration, I think this is a great example of where you see local government is where these problems are being addressed at a far more effective level than at the national level. Folks don't move to America, they move to neighborhoods and they move to cities, and they are integrated into our communities. And so NAFTA and DACA are issues kind of conceptually that get talked about in Washington, D.C., but they are people's lives, and they are people that we shop with and go to church with, and that our children go to school with at the local level. So we are far more motivated, I think, to try to find some sort of a solution. A third of my community is Hispanic, and a lot of those are immigrants. We don't have a real good handle on what percentage are undocumented, but it's significant. Mesa is a very fast-growing city. We are very dependent on having accurate census numbers. A couple of years ago, we participated in the trial census, and we moved from 38th to 36th largest city in the country. We don't care what number we are, but we do care about how many dollars we get from our state government, because we use shared revenue is tied to population, as is congressional representation. The overall attitudes that have been expressed from the administration have caused us some financial and economic concern. Mesa's biggest trading partner is the country of Mexico. The first part of every meeting is spent apologizing and working on relationships and assuring people that on an individual and on a local government level that we are very anxious to engage with Mexico. And so that's another reason. I mean, there's good reasons to be pro-immigration reform, but there's also very selfish reasons. It's good for our economy coming from a border state, I can tell you.
That winter of 13, right after the election, there were 4 young people who were killed in my town. And so the first thing that I had to do officially was go to funerals of young people. There's a technology called ShotSpotter. And what that does is if a bullet is fired, there is an antenna that triangulates the bullet. You can identify within 5 feet where the shot was fired. It automatically calls the police, because if you live in a neighborhood where people have been hearing gunfire for years, they stop calling the police. And it makes it that much harder for the police to get to the bottom of that particular crime. Every single superintendent for the past 30 years had told me that when a young person had been killed, I could have told you that that young person was going to be killed. I could have told you that young person would be a shooter. And so when I was finally mayor, I said, well, okay, when that superintendent told me the exact same thing, I said, well, who's next? As we identified these young people, we discovered there are about 600 of them in our community. And then we went door to door and met with the parents, and we said, do you think your child is going to be in trouble, is going to do something? But what we've done is build programming around those 600 kids, and since we call it Community Youth Stat, our numbers are really good. Our homicides have gone down since 2011 by 75%. Our non-fatal shooting victims have gone down by 56%, and our shots fired have gone down by 72.4%. So we think we're onto something.
Some of the predictive analytics could say that if you are in a certain part of town and it's rained in the last 3 weeks and your user base uses a lot of water on Tuesdays, it's more likely to fail. We'll never know why. This is how a lot of Facebook and Hulu ad algorithms work. They don't have to know why in order to work. And the ironic thing is, in that sense, this machine learning resembles data, ordinary data use less. It resembles human pattern recognition more. So really what that iPhone scanning for potholes is doing is it's mimicking the intuition of a 30-year career experienced foreman on the road crew who can sense but not explain when a road is about to fail. And we need to do things like this to wring every bit of efficiency we can out of the systems, because Washington is not going to send us a lot of help.
The statistic that bothers me the most about my community, when I started as mayor 3 years ago, we were sending out these young public safety folks 2,500 times a year to suicide scenarios. That was 3 years ago in a city the size of 500,000 people. At a meeting a week ago, I asked about that statistic, and it's now 3,500 suicide calls a year that we're sending young public safety folks out that might not have a lot of life experience or a way to confront how do you solve that problem. So we're trying to get better at training our police officers to de-escalate, to recognize ways that they can respond better to mental health situations.
This younger generation, millennials, they don't work in offices anymore. They work at home most of the time. And so it really is important that cities then be places that are interesting for these people that have no other social ways to deal with people. They may even have the job, so it's not a question of them doing other things, but they have no other way to interact. And that's going to be a challenge, and is a challenge for all of our cities because of the way that young people work these days.
Our challenge was that because we shrank after that economic shock, we lost about a quarter of our population. When I took office, residents said that the biggest issue on their mind was vacant and abandoned houses. Nobody could tell me how many vacant and abandoned houses there actually were. When that question didn't get answered, that was when all the mayor's office interns were informed that they now worked for code enforcement. I sent them to go count. We spent a year of really nuanced and sophisticated data gathering, figuring out market conditions and house conditions, and then realized that the only way we could actually propel those findings into action would be a childlike goal in its simplicity. So that was when we said, all right, let's do 1,000 houses in 1,000 days. Data came in, data transparency came in because we published an online scoreboard. Every day you could see how many houses we'd fixed, how many were torn down, and how many days remained before we made our goal. And that was really the key, because the resources were always there, they just hadn't been gathered. What gathered them was the political pressure we put on ourselves by publicizing this goal that would be very easy and obvious to tell if we had missed. And so it furnished that kind of propulsion that we needed. Did it work? Yeah, I mean, we don't have those vacant abandoned houses anymore, which is great. About 600 of them were removed, about 400 were repaired. There's a successor challenge which has to do with making use of vacant lots that may not, I know this will not compute in New York, but just to give you a sense of how different our housing market is, we have a lot of houses that are unaffordable because their prices are too low. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is in my neighborhood, you can get a perfectly good house for maybe $50,000, $60,000 bucks. When you go below 50, it's actually really hard to get a loan because it's not worth it to the bank to finance it. And so you got a lot of families that are perfectly capable of fixing up a house, but can't get the credit. And so similarly, it'll be a while before these vacant lots are built on by the private sector at market rates. So we're experimenting with things like tree nurseries that we can use for our parks department, or clover, which is great because you don't have to mow it and it's hypoallergenic. Whatever we can think of to hold the land while the economy grows around it.
The thing I am most proud of in our city is passing high quality pre-K. For a city like Dayton, thank you. I'm very proud of it. And I think that the community to invest in itself in that way for a long, you talk about something long term, they're not going to see the result of that for a decade plus, right? And for them to invest in that when most of them don't have 4-year-olds, I think is something that just makes me so proud of our community. Now, I'd like the state to do more on pre-K. I'd like the federal government to do more on pre-K, because it needs to be all across the board instead of just in some specific cities.
Watch these mayors. You can tell they're superstars and they're on their way up, and they're doing wonderful things with their cities. So let's give them a big hand.